holds Lesotho and Swaziland independent countries. In 1994, those same levers of power were handed over from the apartheid regime to the ANC regime. I can sit here and I can recount lists of things that I can throw mud at the ANC party for. But I'm not going to do that. I think we all know it well enough. What I'm going to do is say that it's not the ANC's fault as an entity in itself or the individuals. It's not the apartheid regime's fault necessarily, but it's a system that was imposed by the British Empire in 1910 that necessitates that we oppress each other, that we centralize power in the hands of a few to the detriment of others. And what the Cape Party is saying is that system needs to change. What the Cape Party is calling for is greater autonomy for the Western Cape region, and I mean that economically, politically, and socially. I'll go into details of that later. And if the ANC regime will not negotiate with us on that basis, if we get a majority here in the Western Cape and the Greater Cape region, if we get 51%, we will hold a referendum, and if we get the majority, we will declare the Western Cape an independent country. Yes. So, we get asked, can the Western Cape survive on its own?
What's the meaning of majority?
Sorry?
What's the meaning of majority?
What's the meaning of majority? 50 plus 1. 50 plus 1. As Medea Farid brought up earlier, 70% of the Cape population is discriminated against racially and culturally by the ANC government's central policies. 70% of us are discriminated by these policies. So yes, if we can find 50 plus 1 people who are unhappy, which I think there's no shortage of us, we've got our own country. If the Cape Party had what the DA has right now, we could declare the Western Cape an independent country. Look, I mean, I've got decent personal relationships with members of the DA. I've got a deep annoyance with their policies and the way that they run the Western Cape. And this is what we as the Cape Party are pleading to you as voters. Please, put your faith in us. We've been called, mad and crazy. How can you make the Cape an independent country? Well, I'll get into all the economic, social, political reasons, and I'm pretty sure once I finish speaking, you won't think it's that crazy. But let us wild dogs free. Let us wild dogs free in Parliament. Let's shake it up a bit. Are we not sick and tired of the way politics has been running for decade after decade? Not just under the ANC, but under the apartheid government, under the British Empire. Let's fix the whole system. So I'm pleading, we need 5,000 votes for the Cape Party to get 1 seat in the Cape Town Council. And I can assure you, we will raise hell in there. So if you invest your faith in us, we promise not to let you down. Okay, so, how much time do I have?
3 minutes.
Fantastic. Okay, so, Stuart said, oh, well, that would be a DA government. Well, that's, maybe I just the only one who heard you. But, well, then I would love to sit down at the table and discuss this. But I've had discussions with the DA, and the response is not that. Maybe the sub-council has a different perspective to the national, and this is it. You've got it's centralized. So you've got Musi Mamane telling you how to run your sub-council. That shouldn't be the case. Stuart is from here. He should be able to handle things in his local community. He knows what happens in Gordons Bay better than anyone else. But because of the political structure, his hands are tied, and all of our hands are tied, and we have no recourse against these politicians. So economically, the Western Cape pays 185 billion rand in taxes to the National Treasury, which is controlled by the ANC government. Yeah. We get back 41 billion on our provincial allocation and 4 billion on our local allocation. That's 45 billion rand out of 185 billion rand. If we were an independent country, we would have an additional 140 billion rand. And we worry about building schools and hospitals and looking after infrastructure. We could absolutely clean it. We could cut taxes in half and double services. This is what an independent Cape could be. So I could talk a lot more about many other things, but perhaps we'll chat later. I want to leave it on that note before my time runs out. So please give us the opportunity. We will fight for you in the council, and we want to push this message further. Let's make the Western Cape an independent country. Let's take our freedom back. Thank you.
For those of you who don't know, Stellenbosch University Choir has just been voted the world's best choir. It was in 2014. They've been at Sochi in Russia. It wasn't given great prominence in the press, but then I think it was a little bit later on. But I mean, we are, at least if we go independent in the Western Cape, we know we sing better than anyone. As a start. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to open it to the floor now, please. Just put a hand up. I will pick you. I will try and be we'll move around as much as possible. If you can aim a question fairly briefly, if possible, at any specific speaker. I have agreed with the speakers that if somebody they would prefer in the audience from their party who is better equipped to answer the question is able to do so, then we're going to work on that. If you're happy with that, then that's what we're going to do. I mean, every so often there will be something which will perhaps be better answered by a member who's sitting in the audience. For obvious reasons, we could only have one speaker from each party. So, ladies and gentlemen, any questions, please? Gentleman there, sir.
Thank you. I have a question for Mr. Pringle. It's generally known that rules and regulations are designed to regulate the society at whatever level to the benefit of all members of the society. Now my question is in view of a specific local issue, which is safety. I'm talking about the bridge area. The situation currently is that the rights of those who live outside, by their own choice, outside of the rules and regulations of society, those people's rights trumps those of members of society who live within those rules. So how is it you're going to address that situation? Every day we hear about robberies, assaults, muggings, threats, thefts, things being taken from aged people, from women, from children. How are we going to address the situation? Because the problem that we have, Mr. Pringle, and it's evident in the township, we hear these rumors, is that people are starting to take the law into their own hands. If the government, who is mandated by the voters to do this, does not act decisively. Thank you.
Thank you. Good.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that question. It is obviously a very topical issue. And I think my colleague Benedicta as well will be able to respond in more general terms as well. But with regards to the issue of the bridge, there have been people living under that bridge for about 20 years now. It is becoming far more numerous, and it is in fact a danger. There have been muggings there, there have been assaults. I know that the police have raided there more times than I think Renee and I care to remember. Law enforcement have removed people. We've cleaned out that bridge on a number of occasions. We've had bars installed there, bars get stolen. It is a continuing problem. And the issue around street people is very much a social development issue, but that's not the focus of your question at the moment. The focus of your question is how do we actually move people out from there?
Are we taking decisive and permanent action to safeguard residents?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a whole lot of issues there about the difference between the social aspects of people who live on the streets and the law enforcement aspect. But we've looked at a number of possible solutions. As you're aware, on the other side there's going to be a development, and right now in terms of phase 13 of the flood alleviation work, which I didn't manage to get to, I have actually asked the engineers to see if they can't divert some of the water so that it can actually flow through that particular bridge to actually get rid of those people there. But similarly, one of the residents, Peter Wrench, is busy working with the city to actually fence off that one area as well. So with that, those two aspects, hopefully we will actually be able to clear them out. But as you say, it's actually the enforcement of the law which is a major problem. And again, I mean, my colleague Billy Smith there, who's the chair of the CPF, will agree that very often we are very let down by the courts, and that is unfortunately not within our ambit. But we have got to keep up the pressure, and we are, and I believe, in fact, there was an operation done this morning to actually clear away the structures. I would request, please, that residents, when they see illegal structures being erected, please report it so that the city and or SAPS can act. So I hope that's responded to your question. I'm happy to deal with it later.
Thanks, sir.
I'm happy to take it further with you as well. But those are the aspects that we're considering so that we can actually solve it, because it is a major problem. It's an eyesore. It has been there for a long time, but it is a major, major problem. I'm happy to address the social issues around homelessness as well. I'm quite happy to deal with that, but I think we'd like to give everybody else a little information.
What I'd also like to do, ladies and gentlemen, if you, with your permission, is if any comments also from the table, from the candidates, in response to those, because I think that sort of balances things out a little bit more. So if any of the four, any of you four, want to comment on what other has just said, please feel free to do so. Maureen, you want to say
Yes,
something?
I'd like to make a comment. And I think we talk about effective action, and I've watched the DA over the last few months clearing out these people, as Mr. Pringle has said. Now, yes, there are social problems around that, but the fact is, what happens is the DA, they go in, they destroy the structures, they take away the bedding, they take away the clothes, but they do bugger all else. And what happens is that people then move back in again. And I don't think that we're addressing these issues at the ground, at the bottom of the building. So we're basically building a house and putting a roof on the top without the foundations and without the walls.
Sure.
If I may, I was dealing with it from very much the clearing of the area rather than social issues. The Democratic Alliance in the city of Cape Town has a social development strategy and a street people strategy specifically to deal with people living on the streets. And it is specifically geared at encouraging people who live on the streets to move off the streets and be reintegrated into the community. So a long-term strategy. It does not involve putting people on trucks and carting them off into some other area. But the fact is, we work very closely with the Helderberg Street People Centre. We work very closely with the night shelter. And I raised the example of the food garden, for instance. Andy Lawton with the Helderberg Street People Centre, which was in Victoria Street, was moved to the night shelter precinct. And thanks to implementation of the street people strategy, whereas in Victoria Street about 400 people a day were receiving food through a grill gate, they now receive a sit-down meal. There is dignity. They are able to work for tokens, which they are then able to use for a meal. They are able to use to purchase clothing. They're able to exchange it for a shower. That number has dropped from 400 to I think it's about 30 or 40 people a day. And again, because very often we refer to people as homeless. But people who live on the streets are on the streets for a number of reasons, not simply because they're homeless. You have paroled ex-prisoners. You have people who've come to the city in search of a better life, who are stranded here. Very often, all they need is the opportunity to be taken home. And in actual fact, both the HSPC and the night shelter have successfully reintegrated people, many, many people, back into the community. So it isn't strictly speaking true to say that their shacks are simply torn down and they're left to fend for themselves. In fact, nothing could be further from the truth. However, one of our biggest problems, ladies and gentlemen, and I really do want to make this plea, is that very often, and the people who work in this sector, Andy and Joe, will echo what I'm saying, is that their biggest difficulty is people who give directly to people on the streets. It is far better, ladies and gentlemen, to support the charities, support the NGOs, which are doing fantastic work. And I've been on operations and demonstrations with people like Joe, where we stand on the streets and we say, please don't give directly to people. And the abuse that good people like that take from people who, and I say this with the greatest respect, almost insist that it's their right to give money to people on the street. And we simply don't know enough about those people's story to know what that money is going to be used for. And I would really encourage people to rather give directly to charities so that we can assist in getting people off the streets. So much longer term.
Come on.
A lady down there would like to make a comment.
Yeah, well, I've got a couple of questions. Firstly, Mr. Fourie. Mr. Fourie, you know, you have been in politics for a very long time. And I'm actually shocked at your lack of understanding of our political milieu. You talk about the fact that when people come from the Eastern Cape, that they must bring about money. Now, I don't know where you were a couple of years ago when there were homelands, and when the people in the Eastern Cape were impoverished. You talk about money, and I'm just asking myself, how do you expect, in a situation like that created by the apartheid government, that those people are going to have
Which
money?
he was part of.
Then the other one I want to ask you, Mr. Murray, you talk about the fact that, yes, it is now the whites that are fourth and the Indians third and the coloureds and then the blacks. My problem with that is, when are the blacks in South Africa, when are the injustices going to be addressed in your party? Because I have a lot of black voters here, and we need a chance and they need a chance, and you are not the party to give our black voters a chance. And I hope you pocket your party right where it should be, right there, because your party is not the party for our future voters, not at all. Then the other one I want to ask you is the fact that you make various claims about how great you are and how great a politician you are. But let me tell you this, and I want the voters to know. In 2006, you sold out your voters by forming a coalition where the ANC, the very ANC that you are criticizing today. Then Peter Mulder, in 2009, did exactly the same, and he became Deputy Minister of Agriculture and Forestry. And now you are claiming that the ANC is this monster, which is fine, we all know that. But Mr. Fourie, will you sell out your voters again? Will you sell them out like you're trying to sell out black voters out here tonight? And I'm saying to you, you do not vote for the Freedom Plus. So will you then grab the DA by its throat and undo all the good services that the DA has done again and again? And I want to say to you, Mr. Fourie, you should be ashamed at your lack of understanding of the South African politics.
Two very brief questions there, thank you. Andrea,
Chairman, I'm quite surprised at the lack of knowledge of this lady. Because he made a number of statements here which are blatant untruths. I wouldn't call it a lie, I said blatant untruths. Let me start with the beginning. I didn't say that the black people coming from the Eastern Cape must bring the money. I said the money must be taken from the province and handed to the province of the Western Cape if people are moved. The provinces get their subsidy from the central government. And if there's a movement of people, I say the money must follow the feet. I didn't say the individual blacks must bring the money. So don't come, no, it's not the same thing, of course not. Don't show your stupidity.
Sorry, by the way, Adams, and you will not talk down. I'm sorry, you will not talk down on.
please allow Mr. Fourie to answer the question.
The second point of affirmative action, which I spoke about. You know what happened with the Correctional Services case? The court gave a verdict just about 2 days ago, I think on Friday. What happened is that the ANC wanted to force the demographic figures of the country onto the Western Cape. In the Cape, basically, you have got 50%, 60% colored people, just about 58-60% colored people, and you've got about 34% black people and about 18% white. That's roughly what the figures are. And because of affirmative action, coloured people who were working for correctional services in the Western Cape didn't get promotion. They had to go to court to get that fixed up because the central government wanted the demographic figures of the central government to be enforced on the Western Cape. And thank goodness an organisation like Solidarity took the matter on behalf of these people to court, and those people are now installed in their jobs by a court order, and they've got back pay, and that is why I say it is a blatant racist policy, which I can't accept.
Except most blatant racist policies.
Pardon?
Except most racist blatant policies.
Would you like to ask your question and I'll answer it? Do that. Just stand up and ask your question and I'll answer it. You ask the chairman. Don't interrupt me. The third point, I didn't interrupt you when you spoke, or any of your speaker here. Then let's talk about coalitions. Let's talk about the argument that the lady made about coalitions, that we were in coalition with the ANC. It's a blatant lie. It's a blatant lie. You know what happened? Since 1994, when the ANC took power, they have invited smaller parties to become part of the cabinet or a deputy minister. Chief Buthelezi served on the ANC cabinet for years as the Minister of Interior. Was he in coalition with the ANC? No, he wasn't. What happened with Dr. Mulder was, he was called in by President Zuma and said that he's got a serious problem in regard to food security for South Africa. Wouldn't he help him to be the mayor, the deputy mayor, minister for agriculture, with a specific object to liaise with the farmers to make sure that we've got food security for South Africa? He said, I'll do it on one condition. I'm not going into coalition with you. I'm not prepared to defend any ANC issues. I will do the job with the farmers. He consulted AfriForum, Agri South Africa, the farming organization. He consulted the Transvaal Agricultural Union, and he consulted a number of people, and they said, please take the job, because then at least we will know what's going on in the minds of the government, and you can help the farmers. On that basis did he do that job. Eventually, he took on Mr. Zuma in Parliament on the issue of land distribution, which your party supports. Which your party supports, yes? No. Yes, your party supports. You voted for that law. You voted for that law. And when that happened, Mr. Zuma didn't reappoint him. So we said, thank you very much, that's done. The last point. You wanted to know what our attitude is towards the ANC and the EFF. I want to ask you. I want to ask, oh, Mr. Pringle. I want to ask the DA today, can you give us the assurance that you will not form a coalition anywhere in South Africa with the EFF? Yeah. Because that is speculative. That is speculative all over in the media. That there were discussions between the DA and the EFF. Now I'll tell you, the EFF is 10 times worse than the ANC. We were not in coalition with the ANC. We will not go into coalition with the EFF. But let us talk about coalition. In 2006, when the DA didn't have an overall majority in Cape Town, who helped Mrs. Zille to become the mayor of Cape Town? The Freedom Front, the ACDP, and other smaller parties. We helped her to become the mayor of Cape Town to keep the ANC out. And you know what happened? After a few years, she did a deal with Mrs. DeLille of the ID, and she kicked us out. And she kicked us out. Unilaterally, she kicked us out. Now, if you want to talk about coalitions, let's talk about coalitions.
Sorry, Jefferson. The Cape Party is wasting our time here.
What?
Yes, Jefferson. What I'm going to ask from the Congress of the People is that the crime is very, very high here in this area. The farmers are getting killed. The children are getting raped and killed. So I want to know from the Congress of the People, what is going to do with this high rate of crime here in this Helderberg area?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for your question. No, crime is not a simple thing. Crime is a very complex thing. And there are reasons why people do crime. There are people who are willing criminals and there are people who are unwilling criminals. If I was a mom and I had a child to feed, quite frankly, I would break into a house if I had no work and no money to feed my child. So there are those criminals, and then there are hardened criminals who are doing crime. So I think let's talk about, I mean, crime is actually it's a national strategy, and as one of the speakers earlier said, that the police actually don't fall under what we can do locally, but it's around law enforcement. Now, my personal experience of law enforcement, and the councillor sitting in the front here, is that under the DA, corruption is rife, and that when I spoke to this particular councillor here about a particular event, in my own personal experience, well, she threw her hands up. Benedicta, I'm sorry. All right, so COPE is saying, locally, we will go to people, we will listen. So we have a gentleman there who's talking about, and I think, you know, one of the reasons I didn't want to speak very long at the beginning was because I wanted to hear what the people say. And one of COPE's things is that the people will govern. And in fact, if you look at the national strategy, it's around people, it's around people's participation in government, it's around removing councillors who are not responsive to the community if they're not performing.
Yeah.
So that is what we will do nationally, but it is also what we'll do locally. So, you know, let's come back to the issue of crime. In terms of the farming community, our president is looking at re-establishing a kind of a commando system which would allow people to protect their property. We are also looking at increasing police wages. So one of the things is policemen, teachers and nurses are paid appallingly. Are we surprised that our police are criminals? When they can't even feed a family on the money after their deductions and their pension and all of their you know, do you know what the average policeman would earn? So the first thing we're saying is we will look at salaries, we will look at working conditions, and then we will put in training programs to ensure that people are trained adequately to do the jobs, that station commanders will get management training. So you've got to start somewhere. And that's where we're going to start, and we're going to then move it into the community as you get better and better equipped and more well-equipped policemen. We're talking about that as a national strategy, obviously, because that's the police. Law enforcement, all we can do, it's unlikely at this point in time that COPE is going to come in as the DA. So we won't unseat the DA at this point because people don't know us yet. What we will do is we might come in, and I'm certainly expecting us to come in various wards, and I can give you our guarantee on COPE's behalf that we will continue to raise issues, and we will continue to knock on doors, and we will continue to take it up at the highest level. The problem is that the DA, the highest level, doesn't listen. So that is the big problem. But we promise that we will do, I mean, I know of situations in council meetings where an ACDP member, councillor, who was talking, mic was switched off, so that he couldn't actually comment. We will continue to shout. We will shout above the mic being off. And that's all we can do. Sure. Until such time as we have a majority in the Western Cape, and then, as I say, moving into other parts of the country.
Right, thank you. Frank, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I would. I mean, in just about every single speech I've heard here, there's something that I really deeply connect with. But what we're not addressing is that we're never going to be able to solve any of these problems. I mean, I love that suggestion of a commando system to where communities protect themselves. That's fantastic. But what did the ANC do? We had commandos before. They disbanded them. We can't do any of these things. If we want to change it, we're going to have to take power back. We're going to be very firm about this. We have to say, listen, it's not working. And it's very nice to have plans and say, look, if you give us power, we're going to do this. We're going to do it better than that party. No, we're a new party.